In my talk, in my few minutes, I cannot talk about all modern history Jerusalem. I'm going to concentrate about the development of Jerusalem since second half of the 19th century till 1948, till the Nakba of 1948. And I would like you to know a few important things which we usually forget. That in beginning second half of 19th century, a very important process of urbanization and modernization was happening all over Palestine. And like we are known from Professor Salim Tamari, that the coastal area of Palestine, the western area of Palestine that included the cities of Gaza, Yaffa, Haifa, Akka, was becoming more influential and more important than the mountain cities that were much more important in centuries before that, like Nablus, El Khalil, Jerusalem. Still Jerusalem, since second half of the 19th century, mainly after the Crimean Wars, started becoming the biggest and most important political center in Palestine. This was not something happening much before that. Jerusalem had its religious importance and its cultural importance for the Islamic world and for the Christian world and for Judaism for a long time. But it became such a very important political center, mainly in modern history Palestine, and more after the British occupation and the declaration of Jerusalem as the capital of Palestine. Palestine, with the borders that everybody is dealing with, as if there is something sacred with these borders. These are colonial borders. Do not forget that these are colonial borders made by the French and the British for Palestine. We did not need these borders. There are no rivers or big seas or huge mountains or deserts separating Palestine from Jordan or Lebanon or Syria. This could have been all one big place, like what a lot of the Palestinian elites and leadership in Jerusalem second half 19th century wanted it to be. At the beginning, with the development of Arab nationalism, a lot of the old families and important families in Jerusalem, like the Husseinis and Nashashibis and a lot of others, a lot of the Palestinian elite in Jerusalem, mainly at the beginning of the 20th century, were seeing Palestine part of a big thing named Bilad al-Sham that included Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine. Now, there was a very fast modernization happening, and a lot of people were immigrating to Jerusalem from all over the world. Jerusalem, by the way, you are used maybe when people talk about cities to think about big cities geographically and big numbers of population. At the beginning of the 19th century, Jerusalem was something very, very small. It is what we usually have in mind, this old photo of old Jerusalem, which is more or less 1 square kilometer. At the beginning of the 19th century, it was 10,000 people. At the end of it, maybe a little bit before the First World War, all of the population were 60,000. With all the Zionist immigration and the Palestinian immigration during the Mandate period, which was coming from all over, including people from the Arab world and from different European states. In 1948, it's a city of 160,000 people. Of course, the old city was not enough in size to have all this Palestinian development and also later on the Zionist project. So second half of the 19th century, people started getting out of the walls of Jerusalem and building modern Jerusalem. At the beginning, there were the neighborhoods nearby the walls of the old city, and later on it was developing geographically to be something much larger and much bigger than what we usually have geographically when we are thinking about Jerusalem. Now, this process was happening because of a lot of reasons. One of them is that the Ottoman Empire were losing the wars, and the European states starting being much more influential inside the Holy Land. This brought a lot of investments by different churches from all over the world, mainly the Greek Orthodox Church and the Russian Church, but also there were investments from different parts of churches in Britain, from America, and the churches became a very important player beginning second half of the 19th century in modern Jerusalem. Another very important player, that there was a lot of immigration from the villages and other Palestinian cities in Jerusalem. Now, when the British occupies Palestine and they declare that their capital is Jerusalem, something big has happened. This is the first time that you have what we think about as the borders of Palestine the way we know them today in one state. And the main political center in this state is Jerusalem. The old elites continues to play a very important role, at least for a decade or a little bit more, all across the 1920s. But a lot of things changes in the 1930s, also inside the Palestinian leadership. And you have the youth coming inside the leadership, and a lot of changes are happening. You not just don't have only the old famous families of Jerusalem like Al-Alami, Al-Husseini, Al-Nashashibi, Al-Nusaybi, and all the others as the main player in politics. You have a lot of other, mainly educated middle class that are building also modern political parties. A lot of changes is happening in a very, very short time. Jerusalem is changing dramatically under the British mandate as the most important political and cultural center, but a lot of other things are happening. Usually, when people talk about modern history Palestine, they concentrate on political history. In my talk to you today, I would like to tell you about something else. I would like to talk a little bit about the development of modern education and what happens with this development. At the beginning of the 20th century, there are big, of course, struggle or big fights about the numbers, but more or less maybe 2% of the Palestinian society knew how to read and write. 1948, you have something like more than 50% of the youth in Palestine knew how to read and write. This was a big change. Jerusalem was leading a lot of nets of education, mainly under the British mandate. Of course, what the British has promised at the beginning of their mandate in Palestine, that after 4 years of their occupation, every child in Palestine will have a place at school, never worked. And most of the education system in Jerusalem continued being private system education. Still, the British built a lot of schools. All the churches had a lot of nets of schools, and a lot of the Islamic NGOs and associations had a lot of nets of schools. In general, till 1948, most of the education in Palestine, in Jerusalem mainly, was not by the British mandate. Most of the students were inside the private system. I think that this private system that brought a lot of people to know how to read and write was one of the most important political problems in modern history Palestine. We had too many players in the education system. Each one had his own views, had different policies, had different curriculums. People studied in this small city geographically. Neighbors went into schools that taught them in Arabic, Hebrew, English, Greek, Russian, different languages that came with the Jewish settler colonial project. People had to learn different things in this small city. Now, this could be a great blessing if you had a political stability and people would have agreed at least on the way you read the history and the present of the space that you are living with. But this was not happening in Jerusalem. The students, the young generations, were being raised on different historical stories, different way of how to think about their society, different languages, different backgrounds. This made a lot of disagreements between how do you read your present and your future. This is why it was very hard, by the way, for the political activists, that there were a lot of them with the modern education and a lot of the middle class becoming part of the political activism in modern Palestine, to agree on anything, because a lot of them came from different languages, different backgrounds, because of this big private education system. And this brought them in a situation that they could not agree on anything. This was a very big problem in the way that the Palestinians could not be united. I think this thing is continuing till today. There isn't one big education system which is controlling at least the majority of the students, which is building for them a common reading of their past, their present, and their future. And this is why it's really hard to bring and unite the people. Now, another very important thing that was happening was modern education. How much time do I have?
Have less than 10 minutes.
It's very good. It's very good. Okay. So another thing was happening is that there was a lot of cultural, with modernity and modern education, there were a lot of new modern public spheres developing all over the city of Jerusalem. The city was growing very fast. There was modern planning, was a big municipality working there, and a lot of things were newly introduced, like cinemas, theaters. A lot of change was happening. Now, of course, this is a religious area where religion plays a very important role. And a lot of the religious elites will not be agreeing on all these changes. And the changes were happening. Those who were supporting these changes were the youth who were being educated in the modern education system. But not everybody liked what was going on. I would like to finish my talk with one of the stories to tell you about this complexity of what was happening in cultural life, modern Jerusalem. One of the people I had an interview with, he was 12 years old during the Second World War. And he was raised in an Islamic conservative family, in a Muslim conservative family. And he used to hear his big brother, who was 15, his name was Muhammad, and the young boy was Shaban, who was 12. So Shaban used to hear his brother, Muhammad, who was 15 years at that time, when he goes to the cinema in Jerusalem, and then he goes back, and all the week he speaks with his friends about how great was the movie, how much they enjoyed, and the young boy was quite enthusiastic, wanted to go to the cinema to see what is a cinema, what's going on there. But the big boy, the big brother, knew that this is a problem for them as people who were raised in a conservative society. The cinema, of course, it was mainly cinema consumption, mainly Arab Egyptian cinema consumption, was very far from the society. It was much more secular. It was very different. So he did not want to take his big brother, his small brother. So, of course, the small brother went to his mother, and the mother tells the big brother, if you're not going to take your brother with you to the cinema, there is no money for this weekend. So he had to take him with him. They went to the cinema. Now, his luck was that his first movie was an Arab Egyptian movie with a Lebanese very famous actors and singers. His name is Sabah. And Sabah in this movie was wearing a dress with no leaves. Now, for him, this was too much. He didn't know how to handle it. This is the first time in his life. He's in a conservative society. He was feeling ashamed all the movie. Now, in the middle of the movie, there was a kiss. For him, this was too much. He couldn't handle it anymore. So he asked his brother, tell me, Muhammad, are these people kissing in front of everyone? Are they married? He tells him, no, they are not married. The small boy didn't know how to deal with this thing. He was very ashamed. He put his face behind the back of his brother. And all the second half of the movie, he watched the back of his brother. He was very ashamed. And when they were going out home, the big brother knew it was a big mistake to bring this young boy. And he was telling him the whole way, when they are going back home, you don't tell anything to our parents. You didn't see anything. He was warning him the whole time, next time I will not bring you with me. But for him, for the small boy, it was the first time in his life that he was seeing something like this. And he was quite ashamed, and his face was red. The minute he opens the door, his mother straight sees that there is something wrong. So she shouted on him, Shaban, what happened? He didn't want to say, but the first sentence he could bring out was that, I saw him kissing her. Now, she did not know exactly what happened. He had a few shouts. He was punished. The second time he went to the cinema after 3 years. Now, it's not that things were happening, okay? Jerusalem was being modernized, mainly by modern education. A lot of people were supporting this process, but still, not everybody in the society was liking what was happening at that time. So the process was a very complicated process that was, I think, totally destroyed in 1948. And it was totally destroyed by a settler colonial project, which is the Zionist project in Palestine, which probably you will hear a lot about. I would like to finish my talk to you that Jerusalem was a small, very small, geographically and demographically at the beginning of the 19th century. Because a lot of changes in the international arena, the city developed very fast. To get to 1948 was 160,000 people. By the way, at that time, 100,000 were nearly Jewish and 60,000 were Muslims and Christians, Arab Palestinians. And the society was changing very fast. Same was the leadership, and the Palestinian modernization process that was leading to a modern, national, democratic Palestine was crushed by the settler colonial project in 1948. Thank you very much for your patience.